everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Tetra Travels. This is my new series where I'm interviewing people with spinal cord injuries that I believe have incredible stories to tell. This is part 4 of the story of Ross Morrison. Please go check out the previous 3 videos to hear the first part of his journey. This section is about Ross having a work life, but also just some important messages that he believes his story can teach us. I hope you enjoy it. I hope you find it informative, and hopefully it inspires you to get out there and do something. You just dwelled upon that you work. What is it you actually do?
So I work for Nuffield Health. I have 2 jobs. I work as a personal trainer in the gym, and I work as a rehab specialist.
Do you think the injury has actually helped you be a better person in that job, in that role?
I would certainly say it's given me a unique perspective on what's possible, and also it helps me empathise a lot more with some of the challenges people face. So you do get some people with some chronic sort of joint issues or health issues, and I've been there. I know where you're at. And in some ways, some of the challenges I face are actually arguably more difficult than yours. So I know what you can achieve, and I know what's possible.
Yeah.
And it's just showing them what they can do.
Is working a challenge still? Is it quite tiring?
It's tiring but in a different way. So I never really understood, after having done a full training week, training 5-6 days, so you're physically exhausted and you can't work out with someone's on a 9 to 5. How is that tiring? How is that exhausting? I spent the past week running myself into the ground. But when I was being an athlete, as much as I was training, I was also looking after my body in terms of resting appropriately. When I trained, I would come home and rest, and that was it. And that was part of the job, was to rest and recover from training. So though it's physically demanding, it's actually quite well structured. And then also, because of the nature of elite sport, you literally work in 4-year cycles. Every part of that 4 years is mapped out. You don't actually have to think. You know pretty much what you should be doing for most of the time. Whereas when you got into the working world, it's mentally tiring as well. Even though you still, particularly with family, you still got things to do. So you can't just work and stop. Everything keeps on happening around you. Real life keeps on happening. And you can't just go, I don't feel like going to work today.
Yeah.
You understand all of a sudden actually why people are really tired and burnt out. And then because sometimes the job doesn't end when you come home, and you still have to carry on working. So it's a different kind of tiredness, different kind of sort of approach to life. It's nice because I think it's always important to have a purpose and have a direction. It constantly makes me remind how privileged I was to be an athlete and to have that opportunity where you're being paid to train.
Yeah.
And I always look at sort of athletes out there, and sometimes you see them and you go, you don't understand how lucky you are.
A few silly questions to kind of end with.
Go for it.
What's the best place you've been since your injury?
I'm going to give out a big honourable mention to New Zealand, particularly when we were in Christchurch, New Zealand, and Vancouver in Canada. 2 beautiful places, 2 beautiful countries. But where we did a honeymoon, Hawaii, that was magical.
How was it from an access point of view? Was it?
It's fine, because obviously it's obviously the US are very good on accessibility.
The next one is, are there any books that you've read that you think have been amazing for your journey?
So there was 2 books that one of the things I really got interested in towards the latter half of my career was around sports psychology and mindset. Because I think for a long period of time I treated it as that sounds nice. Until you realise that actually if you're training the body, you should be training the mind. Because the mental approach and mental effort and discipline takes just as much. And it helped that I was already a massive fan. But Clive Woodward's book, Winning, that he wrote after the 2003 World Cup win, was a fascinating insight into how the England team changed and how the things they started to do. And it's not to say it's a perfect way of how to do anything, but the changes they made, the things they went through, were absolutely fascinating, and how members of the squad kind of challenged each other and challenged themselves to get better, and to go from being almost Rans to this phenomenal team who were winning everything, and went on to win obviously a World Cup. And I find that really interesting to read, and I often go back to it and read bits of it, because just some of it jumps out to me, and it's so applicable to in most situations in life. The other one was a more recent book that I kind of wish I read earlier. Was something called Black Box Thinking. It's a really, really good book because it compares two industries, the aviation industry and the medical industry. And the idea comes from that obviously on a plane you have the black box that records everything. And within the within the aviation industry, what they've done, they've taken an approach where every time there's a crash or an incident, they'll review what happened without blame, and they will then institute practices so it doesn't happen again. And what you've seen over time, and still obviously ongoing, is that aviation has got safer and safer and safer. By now, it's the most safest way to travel. Leaving aside the green impact, and that's because little things like how they manage the cockpit, how the pilot co-pilot talk to each other, all the procedures are in place. They've dealt with incidents that have happened. Whereas within the medical industry, if something goes wrong, they cover it up. They don't explore why it went wrong. I'm just quoting from the book. In some areas, there's a culture of you don't challenge. So, for example, there's been instances even in an operating theatre where staff have seen the senior surgeon doing something wrong, but they're not allowed to challenge. They're not allowed to say you can't. That should you rethink that step, or something went wrong. It got covered up as it's just one of those things. And reasons for that range from fear of being sued, a kind of culture of you don't challenge the person above you. Whereas what they showed is from research in that certain medical practices that have instituted a more open look, not only do they get better, but incident rates drop.
Yeah.
And it's those two mindsets of, do I take that honest, open approach to how do I get better? How do I improve what I'm doing every time? Or do I not? And I just found those two books really interesting. And I try and apply those to my life. I don't always get it right. But I think they're two really good books.
Obviously, you face a lot of adversity in your life. Do you think there's a way that you go about dealing with adversity? I'm just thinking from the point of view of other people out there that face little bits of adversity throughout their life.
This is difficult because it comes down to who you are as a person in many ways. So when things go wrong, the initial response is you get a very emotional response of the world's ended. It's all doom and gloom. What do we do? What happens next? And that's a very normal, very healthy response because that's that kind of shock of like, oh my God. But then you've got a choice of, do I stay in that kind of, oh my God, what's happened? Do I blame someone else? Or do you then move into, okay, how do I move forward? What do I need to do? And in many ways, it's not even, it's almost breaking it down to what's that next step. And it can be a very small step. How do I now get out of this problem? How do I now deal with this adversity? And sometimes you have to acknowledge, I can't control some things. And this is a really difficult concept. And in sport, they call it control the controllables. I can control what I can control. And what I can't control, I have to let go. And sometimes that's a really hard thing to do, to acknowledge I can't change certain things. I can't change what our government's going to do. They could put interest rates up, they could put tax down, whatever, they could do anything like that. I can't change that. I can only change how I prepare for that and respond to that. So it's being able to go from the emotional response to the more measured response. And then sometimes when it's all going wrong and you don't have a way out, there's a really kind of good Buddhist saying of carry water, chop wood. And the idea behind it is you just do the basic things of every day while you're figuring stuff out. You don't have to find the answer there and then. You might not be able to find the answer there and then. So you carry on doing the basics to make sure you carry on going.
Kind of leads nicely onto what I was going to ask you as my last question. Probably has overlaps anyway. If there was one piece of life advice you'd have for anyone listening to this, what would it be?
Don't give up, even when it's all going absolutely wrong. And I go back to when I first broke my neck, and I couldn't see a way forward. I didn't know what was going to happen next. And ultimately, I think in most times in life, you're faced with two choices: get on with it or give up. And that's it. What are you going to do? And most of the time, it's not a choice at all. You're going to find a way forward. You're going to get on with it. So whatever happens, just don't give up.
That'll be it for Ross's story. I think it was incredible. I loved hearing about it. I also really loved working on this project. Ross had an amazing story to tell, and I'm really looking forward to bringing you the next person who I think is also incredible. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe, and I'd love to hear your thoughts and comments about what you thought of this new style of video and these stories I'm trying to tell. But yeah, hopefully you've enjoyed it. Let me know and see you soon. That'll be it. See you next week.